For many individuals, life unfolds in a predictable manner, encompassing routine activities, responsibilities, and milestones. From birth to death, they traverse familiar paths, adhering to societal norms and expectations. Their days are filled with mundane tasks, waking up, going to work or school, spending time with family, and pursuing hobbies or interests. While the rhythm of their lives may lack grandeur or excitement, it provides a sense of stability and continuity. These individuals find fulfillment in the simplicity of everyday existence, cherishing moments of joy and connection amidst the ebb and flow of routine. Contrastingly, there are those whose lives are marked by extraordinary accomplishments, earning them accolades and recognition in various spheres. These individuals defy conventions, push boundaries, and leave indelible marks on history. However, not all extraordinary accomplishments garner praise and admiration. There are those whose actions leave a darker imprint on history, earning them negative titles and infamy. One such character was Joseph Douglas Ball, aka Joe Ball. This ordinary-looking Texas man was also known as Alligator Man, Butcher of Elmendorf, World War I veteran, and Bluebeard of South Texas. This was because he was a serial killer. Joe belonged to an infamous family, who was known for their bad deeds. Joe's great-grandfather was John Hart Crenshaw, who was an infamous kidnapper, illegal slave trader, and illegal slave breeder in Gallatin County, Illinois. Joseph Douglas Ball was born on January 7, 1896, in Bear County, Texas, USA. Joe's father was Frank and his mother was Elizabeth. Including Joe, they had 8 children. Joe was a loner who spent most of his childhood exploring and fishing in the great outdoors rather than hanging out with other kids. Joe developed a penchant for guns as he approached puberty. He adored them and dedicated many hours each week to honing his craft. The United States officially entered the European War on April 6, 1917, when it declared war on Germany. Joe Ball enrolled shortly after the war began and was sent to fight on the front lines in Europe. Joe found himself thrust into the chaos of war on the Western Front, where he encountered the harsh realities of combat in the trenches of France and Belgium. Amidst the deafening roar of artillery fire and the stench of death that pervaded the battlefield, Joe demonstrated unwavering courage and determination. It was during one such bombing raid that tragedy struck. A sudden explosion rocked the battlefield, sending shrapnel and debris flying in all directions. Caught in the midst of the chaos, Joe was struck by shrapnel from an enemy bomb, sustaining severe injuries to his legs and torso. Joe was evacuated from the battlefield and transported to a field hospital for urgent medical treatment. Despite the grim prognosis, he underwent multiple surgeries. Joe defied the odds, made a full recovery, and joined the war again. When the World War was over, he was honorably discharged from the army, and he went back to his hometown of Elmendorf. After returning, Joe started working with his father, Frank, at his general store. For Frank, his store was more than just a place to buy goods. For him, it was a cornerstone of the community, a sanctuary where neighbors came together to share stories and swap news. From dawn until dusk, Frank could be found behind the counter, greeting each patron with a warm smile and a genuine interest in their lives. Joe assisted his father in the store, stocking shelves, ringing up sales, and learning the intricacies of running a business with a keen eye. Joe briefly worked for his father before quitting. While Joe did not pursue his father's career path, he clearly took business lessons from him, and on January 17, 1920, Prohibition took effect. With the onset of Prohibition, the demand for alcohol skyrocketed, and Joe saw an opportunity as there was a vast market for illicit beer and whiskey. He started out as a bootlegger. A bootlegger is someone who makes and sells alcohol illegally. Armed with little more than determination and a knack for distillation learned from his grandfather, Joe set up a makeshift still in the barn behind his family's farmhouse. Under the cover of darkness, he worked tirelessly, experimenting with different ingredients and techniques until he perfected his craft, producing a smooth and potent moonshine that would soon become the talk of the town. He knew the consequences of getting caught could be severe, but despite the risks involved in the work, Joe seemed to enjoy it, as he would drive throughout the region in his Model A Ford car and sell whiskey to customers from a 50-gallon barrel. Joe had a brief setback in his bootlegging profession when Prohibition ended in December 1933. Given his extensive knowledge of alcohol, Joe made the decision to build a tavern. Joe constructed a tavern that he called the Sociable Inn. There were 2 bedrooms at the back and a bar, player piano, and dining area in front where the men used to congregate and occasionally engage in cockfights. Joe, with a flair for the unconventional, devises a unique plan to captivate the attention of patrons, keeping alligators on the premises. Joe erected a sturdy perimeter fence around the alligator pool. After that, he built a dedicated sitting area adjacent to the alligator pool. Joe's plan worked like magic, and masses of people arrived to see his new creatures. Joe put on a show every Saturday where he would take a live raccoon, cat, dog, or any other animal he could get his hands on and toss it to the alligators, much to the amusement of his patrons. Joe's male customers appreciated not just his alligators but also the fact that he employed only the most attractive and youthful girls as waitstaff and bartenders. The girls never seemed to stay around for very long, but Joe would always explain that they moved to another city in search of some fast cash. But the reality was way more sinister than that. While the disappearances of his lady employees continued, in around 1937, Joe married one of his waitresses, Dolores. The trouble started when the parents of one of her previous waitresses, Minnie, filed a complaint with the police about her disappearance. They informed the Bearer County Sheriff's Office that Joe was Minnie's last known lover and employer. The police started an investigation, but due to the absence of any evidence, he was eventually dismissed as a suspect. A few months later, another waitress, Julia Turner, went missing, and her family reported her to the police. Joe had hired the missing girl on a part-time basis as well. When the sheriff's deputies returned to the tavern, Joe said she told him she was going through some personal issues and wanted to move on. Once again, investigators were left with no leads and no information. When police visited her accommodation, Julia's roommate told police that Julia had not packed any of her clothes or things. It was decided by the investigators to go back to the pub and ask further questions. This time, Joe seemed to recall that she was in a desperate situation and that he had given her a $500 loan because she didn't want to go back home and was having issues with her roommate. 2 more of Joe's workers went missing over the course of the following few months. Joe was brought in by the sheriff's deputies and interrogated non-stop for hours, but he insisted on being innocent and that they had just gone from the town to another city. Joe was once more a free man, and the ladies were added to an ever-expanding list with no proof or leads to pursue. But this didn't last long. On September 23, 1938, Joe's good fortune ran out. His neighbor came forward to report to the police that he saw Joe cutting a human body and feeding it to the alligators. Additionally, a Mexican-American man informed police about a foul-smelling barrel Joe had left behind his sister's barn. He said it smells like it contains rotting meat. The following morning, deputies from the sheriff's office went to the barn to investigate, but the barrel was gone. When the deputies arrived at the bar, they informed Joe that they were taking him to San Antonio for questioning. The deputies decided to pay Joe another visit. Joe asked if he could first close down the tavern, and the deputies agreed. As the 2 men sat at the bar waiting, Joe grabbed a .45 caliber revolver. He briefly waved it at the deputies, and then he pointed it at his heart and pulled the trigger. The fatal shot killed him instantly. After this incident, a thorough search of the whole premises was conducted, and they discovered rotting meat all around the gator pond and an axe covered with blood and hair. Police recovered some remains of human bodies in the gator pool, and they discovered the bodies of some of his victims buried in sand at different spots. With this, the terror of Joe Ball came to an end, and his story has become part of American folklore and true crime lore.